Okay, so now we're all totally dry. So a couple of coats of gloss on here, which really helps with the decals to adhere better, to sink down, and eliminates 90% of actual silvering. Now, we've covered decaling lots of times before, but a quick run through. Basically, I used to like to use Micro Set, okay, which is the blue one, and Sol. But if you haven't got any Sol like I haven't today, what I tend to do is use acrylic thinners. Now, it's very dangerous using acrylic thinners, hence whilst this has actually had a couple of coats of Future on there, which will neutralise it and stops the paint coming through and everything else. Because obviously when you're brushing around with this stuff, you don't want it to eat into your paintwork and suddenly cause bleeding and things like that. If you want to be safe, then obviously use something like a setting solution or a Sol solution. I like to put a couple of drops of the softener into the water. It smells very much like vinegar. You just give it a bit of a swish around into warm water. It's not cold, it's not hot. If it's cold, they take forever for the decals to actually, you know, sort of soak it up and get in there. If it's warm, it happens a lot quicker. If it's too hot, sometimes what can happen is they actually crack on the actual backing sheet itself because they're absorbing the water so quickly, and they get a little bit too soft and stretchy and things like that. So, excuse me, because we've gone round and done all this nice white paintwork, we've eliminated almost probably 50% of all the decaling that's going to need to be done on this kit. Now, things we are going to have to do is remove the roundels from the actual backing paper and that swoosh, because obviously we don't want the sort of the white swoosh, as I call it, coming at the back. So we can eliminate that one, so we're going to have to cut that one off very carefully. And things like we've got this little guy just down here at the bottom, which is going to go onto our white area. So again, we need to cut those out very carefully, pull them off of the carrier film and put them on. So what we'll do a couple of the tricky ones to show you what I mean. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in with the scissors. Let me just move that out of the way a bit. I'm covered in Tamiya tape here, so we just get some of this Tamiya tape out of the way. So the Royal Air Force one, which is obviously far too complicated for us to come along and try and mask. I do know of people who have actually done the writing with Tamiya tape and written Royal Air Force down the side of their hawks, doing it this way, just the same way as we did the markings, the striping on there, but quite frankly that would take forever and I'm not that much of a martyr to do it. So what we're going to do, thing to remember, there is a left and a right. It gets bigger to the rear. So obviously from our case, what we're going to do, we'll be doing it on this side. So what we're doing, we're just going to turn this round. We probably don't need the stick in the back anymore. So actually what we can do, clamp him on with some clamps, with my clamps. See, more Tamiya tape being stuck to me. Okay, so gripping it from the end, just like so, into the water face down. The reason face down, it stops it curling up, and obviously when it curls up you can get cracking. Let all the bubbles come off it totally. So I'm just going to hold it in here just for a couple of seconds, and really what you want to do is make sure there's no white bits on the back of the actual carrier, where you can see it down here, but you don't want to, if you can see white areas, you know full well it hasn't soaked all the way through. So then you can flip it over onto its other side and look down at it, so you can actually see where it says Royal Air Force down here. There's lots of white bits all in there. So what I'm going to do is just take it off, place it on the surface just down here to start soaking in. Now at the same time we're going to grab a clean brush. So I'm just going to grab a couple of clean brushes here. Clean brushes is something I am very short on at the moment. Into the water, and then test it on a little bit of your toweling or something to make sure it's clean, because if there's any paint left on it, residue, anything, pigments, things like that on your paintbrush, that will get under the carrier film and will stain the underside, and it will be near on impossible to get rid of once you're on. Okay, so basically in your water, check it's a clean brush. Then what we're going to do is check, see if our decal's moving slightly on the paper yet, and it's not really. So we're just going to add a bit more water down on here, down on the backing. Sometimes it's really quick, other times it's very, very slow. So these are moving slightly. But what you're trying to do is just nudge it till it's moving freely up and down the paper. Really like this, okay? When you're moving up and down like that, you know you're okay. So, onto our model. So we're just going to hold it on the side, okay? Checking our reference for locations. So if you've got the real photos, then fair enough. If you haven't, I'm going to use the actual decal thing just out of shot down here. So what we're going to do is just going to add water along the area. And then just push it to that end. Then we're going to lift him up. It's a little bit tricky here. Showing and doing. Okay, so we're going to lift him up. Place him where you want it to be, roughly, onto the model. So we know we need it to sort of come up a little bit. How it actually is. The water on the backing will help wet the area first. So we're just on like this. Then all we're going to do is wet our finger to stop the decal sticking to your finger. Hold it in place. Grab the carrier film, okay, and slide it out the back. Just like so. Very quickly. Okay, so what we can do is now the area is wet like this. We just bring you in a little bit. You can see we can move it around to get it into place. So you want to check your references of how it actually sits and goes on. So we know it really lines up quite well with the panel line coming down. So we want that in like that. Okay, we know it's underneath this guy down here. And it's all straight. So what we're going to do, when you're happy how it's lined up, just like so, then we take a cotton bud, moisten it gently. I wet mine just like that, okay? And then literally we're going to roll out the water from the bottom. What also this will do is straighten it out. So it's a little bit high now, so we need just to pull it down just a touch in the centre area. Okay, I'm rolling the water out the back. Now it's a little bit forward, so what we do is just drag it slightly back, just to keep it in all its positions, just like so. Okay, and there we have the Royal Air Force on like that. Now we've got room for the roundel at the end, and before we dry everything all totally off, what we're going to do is grab one of these said roundels, and for the moment we are just going to have it off the backing paper. Okay, very carefully carrying the roundel round. So now we have it like this, okay? Then what we can do is just for the moment line it up to see how it's going to sit, and to see if there's going to be a huge gap between the two, because obviously it's all quite even how you look at it. There is a little gap. So what we're going to do is just re-wet this area down here. Just a little, okay? Just going to pull it back just a touch, because I want it to come backwards just a fraction. Just to all join up. Then again, dry him out. Then we can check our roundel position. We know that's about right, how we want it. Just up, that's a touch at the back. Okay. And then we just come along with our roundel, soak him in the water, just quickly like that. And then we can come along and we can stick that one on as well. So there we go, Royal Air Force on there, just like that, very nicely how we wanted it to be. And to be honest, it's a little bit translucent, which is why we did all the white work, but it's not too bad. And then just catch it in the light, and if it's looking a little bit off, you can just run your cotton bud over it, just pushing out all the water and the air. Okay, it's simply just like so. Okay. Hoping this one's not going to take too long to come off the old backing. But so sometimes decals, they slip really quickly off, other times they're going to take a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is go around, going to put the roundel on, and then put all the other decals on. Obviously you've got your choices of any of the red arrows you want by looking through. Check your references, because some of the sort of markings and the placard ones and things like that in the information decals on there aren't the same for all of them. They are pointed out some on here that actually say on the instructions that such and such doesn't have such and such, but as I say, check your thing. So we're going to cut out, basically, we're going to nip out the Union Jack to go on the white. We've got the crest, which is going to go onto the actual one, so we're going to cut that one out. The rest of them is pretty standard, going to go on this one all over. So take your time, nice and easy, keep your decals wet until you're absolutely sure where they're going to be, and then you can actually move on. So this one's off now, so if we just pop this one in, so usual thing, we're just going to wet the area quite a bit, overdo it if you like. Now using where we cut it, We are literally just going to come in, pop him down, and slip it into position, just like so, on there, just like that. So really happy how that is. So what we'll do now, we'll rub the water out of it. Okay, totally happy, really looking the part now. So now I'm going to spend the next couple of hours with taking the time, working all the way through the decals. As soon as it's done, we're going to let it dry off then for a couple of hours, ready to go off, and then we can give it another gloss coat to protect those in before we bring it all together. Okay, so decaling is all done, and I have to confess now to a few little problems we've come across, which are totally my own fault. First thing we've done, you might be able to see down here on the tail, is we've positioned this the blue in the wrong place. Okay, now you might think, okay, well that's okay, we can move it, and that's what I would normally do. I would normally come through now and correct the problem, and as I say, there's no real problems in modelling or nothing that we can't overcome quite easily. Trouble is now, I've got the decal set in here, we've also got the other decal up here, so we would have to actually strip back the paintwork to do this, okay, or to spray it grey, so we're going to lose the decaling we've got in there. So you've got the option, you could turn around and say, all right, I'm going to make it 100% perfect, I'm going to go around, we're basically going to draw a line from here forward, mask it off, completely prime and respray the entire back end of it. Which was something I think if I was that worried about, I would probably do. Now the thing is, although it's bugged me, it's probably bugged me more than sort of normal, because of obviously you guys watching it and everything else. But really, can you tell? This is the thing, and this is a little point I'm trying to make here. You know, with the hobby as it is a hobby and it is your personal choice. If you want to make a totally accurate model, with every rivet in the right place, totally, you'd have to rework this model completely, because there is a few inaccuracies with it. But, as I always say, if it looks like a hawk, it is a hawk. If this is a hawk, that's what I'm going to do, okay? The same way with this blue on the tail here. Now I could turn around and think and really pull myself up and say, well look, it's wrong, it needs to be changed and everything else. But because we've free-masked in, you know, and actually painted in our own white stripe, we'd have to manoeuvre it and everything else, and I'd have to source other decals for it probably, because we're never going to get a perfect match and everything else like that. And really, am I that worried about it? No, I'm not. You know, quite frankly, I'm happy how it's come out. She's looking really, really great, and I don't want to fiddle with it anymore and cause any more time and hassle over this. So I'm going to call it quits and say, yes, it is wrong. I know it's wrong. You know it's wrong, but it looks right. Okay, and that's the point to it. It doesn't look bad. It's only when you start looking at reference photos and suddenly checking it. So the big thing is here, if you want to keep it 100% true, check your references time after time. I just got really complacent with the build, and I just assumed when I was spraying all of this and running it that the white came in front of the rudder and the rudder was a separate colour. I didn't appreciate until I checked references and everything that this blue at the back end actually comes further than the rudder forward to a complete new panel line and everything else that works forward. I would have probably found this out very quickly as soon as I was doing the decaling if I'd used the decals, because the decals won't fit. Okay, but the thing is, because I haven't used the decals and we've painted all this white work in, nobody knows any different. So I'm going to call it quits. I know it's wrong, you know it's wrong, but we're going to call it right for this one. So the other thing as well that I've got totally wrong, and I should have done before, we've actually got, if I just bring in this top one in here, we've actually got the navigation lights on the wingtip. I thought they were a little bit smaller than they were, so when I put these actually on, they fit like a dream, don't get me wrong, but the trouble is they're too big because it has got an outer panel in there. Again, we're incredibly close to the actual decal, and being so fragile, we're going to have to sort of paint this in without ruining the decal on this. So as I said, it's not going to be an easy thing to do, but I've got a couple of tips to show you. Really, realistically, I should have put them in first, I should have masked the colour, blended it all in, but I was trying to take a bit of a shortcut here and assumed they were just going to fit in there as the clear part and not have half the fuselage stuck to them as well. So, how are we going to get around that problem? Okay, if we just move that camera out just a bit, what we're going to use is post-it notes. Now these are actually not the genuine ones, I think these are Staples Zone here in the UK, but what we do, we just take a couple of them, okay, and because they're very limited tack, they'll protect up our decal quite nicely, so they should fit in here just like so, and the same on the other side. just like that. Okay, and then what we can do the same with the other side, and because they are very, very limited tack, we won't ruin the decal underneath. So I'm just going to mask these up a minute. Okay, so there we go, all masked up. So using the tape, it is a good way of doing it because it will stop any destruction, shall we say, of the actual decals themselves. Now, if I can get this to stretch over, so going over the spray bay, we've got in here, this is just X19 we use for the wheel wells, but what we're going to have to do is actually prime the actual glasswork itself. Otherwise, if we just put red straight on it, it'll look really translucent and nothing like the wing shape. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what we call a scratch back technique. Because we're using acrylics, what we can actually do, spray it all grey and red, and then scratch in where the light is going to be, and then peel off and scrape away the actual paintwork itself. So if we just start on the underside bit first, one side, and the other, up the other way. So you could use black to do this, but the only trouble, if you use black, it's a bit of a pain to try and cover it. So what we'll do very carefully, I've got a little stand just here. I'm just going to poke it in the stand just to hover like that. To save time and save messing around, I'm just going to switch airbrushes. So what I'm going to do, because it's such a small area as well, is take the top colour cap off, which is one thing which is handy with these Harden Steenbeck airbrushes. Blow all that out. Okay, reload. Now I'm just going to use the normal red. I'm not going to mess around with those colours. Such a small area, I don't think we're going to notice it. Okay. So what I do, we're going to do this twofold. We're going to put this on to start with, right over the top, like we did before, and then what we'll actually do is come back next time. Without doing too much of that. Clean up. The actual bottom part of this is a little, doesn't like being pulled. Okay, so we just check our flow. There's our red paint coming through. So we're just going to hit straight back at it again. Just going to come in and hit down the red. Nice old spray. Then it won't be the same colour, we know that, because what we're going to have to do is actually come in and gloss over, because this is flat paint. Okay. So those are on just like that. Make sure you go right to the edges. So hopefully now, if we carefully take these off, we should be left with just a small touch-in area. Okay, so we've got a small little touch-in area. So what we're going to do is actually mask over the decal itself completely like this. So we'll just reuse these again. Okay, and right the way over. So what this will actually do, we can just sort of blend in a little bit. So we just do the top half first. So as I say, just to blend over that entire area, just like so. Flip over, and we're just going to do it on the underside as well, because it's extremely close on the bottom. Both sides. Back in with the red. Like so. And there we go. So we've got a small little change. You can probably see it's looking a little bit flat on those areas. If we bring this top one in, you might be able to see just there, but it's pretty close. We don't have to worry about it too much. as I say, just like this. And by the time it has got the gloss on it, we won't have any trouble at all. So what we're going to do is just let those dry off. In the meantime, what we can do is, after they've dried off, give it a coat of gloss again, just all over it, okay, and then we can start bringing it all together. So what we've actually done here, we've painted the tyres onto the actual undercarriage, which is still in a loose fit, which is quite a nice touch, and then we can get them attached to the underside. Then we can actually put this centerline tank and get that fitted onto it, get the doors onto it, give it another coat of gloss absolutely everywhere. This time it keeps glossing it up, making it really nice. Then we can get the speed brakes added and all things like that, and then we can finish off by doing this cockpit area, because we've got a spray. It's actually a sealer, it's like a cream coloured sealer, a buff coloured sealer that's on the inside of the actual cockpit system itself. It's not on the outside, it looks like it is, and a lot of kit manufacturers, they'll put the bar going across the top, but theoretically it's on the inside, so we're going to work on that. But we're going to get the outside all done onto its gear so it's all sitting pretty and protected, and then we can then move off of the glossing and really detail this cockpit area before we finish up. Okay, so that's those touch-ups done, they're all drying. So what we've done now, and to be honest, I've just dropped it. Yes, we're to that stage now where the model's fighting me all the way. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to do a quick repair on the nose wheel. Gear is on. It's not glued in, it's just in place because I wanted to make sure it wasn't a tail sitter. And although I did have the paintbrush in the back end, and for a moment I thought, oh my god, it's a tail sitter. Paintbrush out, we're not a tail sitter, we're absolutely fine. So by the time we get the seats and the bits and pieces in, we'll have no problems whatsoever. Now, apart from the underside breaking quite spectacularly, the actual pod itself, as you can see, we took out the tabs during sanding, and also we filled in these bottom ones whilst we were doing it. So what I've actually done here, just move this top one in a little bit. What I've actually done is just taking a piece of brass rod we've got here, okay? This is literally just 1mm. We've actually put new tabs on the end. So we've got one down here and one up here. And all they are is super glued into place. We've then come along with our model down like this. We know they line up this bottom tank to the air intakes, so we place them down and we've marked, and we've drilled two very small holes, and then these come along and poke in the holes, just like so, attaching our belly tank onto the Hawk, just like that. So that gives us our belly tank in position, and then, to be honest, it's actually a very good fit. We haven't even got to glue it, which is quite a nice touch. But as I say, that goes on there now, just like that. So really happy. So now we can work out getting the doors on, getting the actual speed brake down the back. Are we going to deploy it down or up? I'm probably going to have it down just for effect, even though we know realistically they don't. And things like that. Then we're going to have to do a quick repair job onto the nose wheel, which luckily is all in one place in the holding. But then next we can do is actually open up the front cockpit, which we haven't done for a while. Now what we've got to do in here is clean off all this tack, and we've got a little bit of overspray going on in here. So you might be able to see down here, down the back, we've got all this red. We can hand brush that in and then just give it a little bit of rubbing on top. But what we can actually do now is start to go round and fit things in. And okay, so we've been playing around getting the gear on and everything else. So from the underside, you can probably see down here now, main gear's on. To handle this bit carefully at the moment. Everything in, putting in these little activators at the back was a bit of a pain, to be honest. They don't seem to fit, the spread seems to be too wide. So actually what I did was, just whiz you in a second, what we actually did was, this one down here, down that end, we cut off the locating tab for it that pushes in, so it's free, if you like. Needs a little bit of touch up on the paintwork, but now they're dry, they can be pushed in and glued in. The other way you could do, of course, is the activator coming along here. You could cut it a little bit shorter before it goes in. But say all the doors go in, they've got little tabs they hook onto, very straightforward. These main ones are in, everything else like that. I've got to do the front ones as of yet. One thing I wanted to cover with you right now is the actual cleaning up of these clear wingtips down here, purely because if you leave it too long, the paint goes too hard, it's quite hard to actually get it off. So what you want is a cocktail stick or toothpick. That way you're not scratching the paint, the actual plastic directly, and you can get it all out. Okay, so what we've actually got here is our little toothpick. So if I bring you in as close as I dare. Okay, so what we're going to do, literally just picking the sharp end or the most hard end. Okay, push along. You might be able to see there, you scratch the actual plastic, the paint off at the paintwork itself, just like that. But the thing is, at the moment it's quite pliable because it's still soft, but if you take too long getting it off, it can be a bit of a pain. Then all you do is rub it like you would a lottery card, a scratch card, and it should all come away. And then if you've got any little areas left, you can just scratch them all off like that. So a quick flip over, do the underside, exactly the same thing. Okay, so coming along, you know it goes there and then there, a little bit of skin attached. And the bottom ones, for some reason, I've already done the other side, are a little bit harder to get off. Okay, so what I'm going to do, scrape them clean, as I say, so it just acts like a scratch card, for want of a better description of doing it. Okay, front area as well. Then what you can do, just come along, pop in with your clear and gloss and take it off, and there we go, that's your clear parts on, just like that. Quick, very, very easy way of doing it. So as I said, we've done both sides now, so you say, nicely done. Drop a green, drop a red if you want to, or you can just leave them plain depending on how you like to do it. But as I say, put a drop of clear over the top and it just makes them a lot more translucent and everything else like that. So, cockpit, as you can see, we've got the cockpit section in, looking very nice, just like that, really bringing it to life now. What I wanted to do was really pop that in for the moment, just to make sure we had the weights all set, because obviously I was a little bit worried about by the time the dorsal fin door goes on and things like that. And we've got that positioned in as well now, that's all in there, so all the doors. So all we've got to do now is really the front work around the doors, get them all done, put together, put on, very straightforward, just following the instructions, recover it, coat of gloss right the way over, just to seal everything down, all happy, and then we can do the unmasking work and start our work on the cockpit. But you can see it's really looking the business now, really looking the way, liking the way it's looking, coming together and everything else like that. It's really got a nice sense of presence about it. So I'll get on with these bits.